Okay, so I'm Roger Dingledine from the Tor project. Actually, everybody on the panel got re-affiliated to Berkman last night, so don't be confused by your agenda that says we're all from the Berkman Center. So I'm Roger from the Tor project, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about circumvention tools and anonymity tools. In particular, a tool called Tor that we've been working on for the past several years. So big picture, Tor is free software. It's a program that you can get and install on your computer, and it lets you connect to websites or other things on the internet, even if your local network doesn't want to let you get there, or even if somebody's trying to figure out where you're getting to. So it's free software. One of the interesting things about Tor is that it comes with a full specification and documentation that specifies these are the different, these are exactly how we built it, and that way you can analyze it, you can decide if we got it right. You can also build one of your own. Several groups in Germany have built their own Tor-compatible clients. So the network itself, the Tor network, is a bunch of different relays all around the world. We've got about 1,500 volunteers who've decided to set up Tor relays. It's the same program. It's whether you configure it as a relay or a client. So about 1,500 people have decided to let people relay traffic for some number of users. It's an anonymity system, so it's a bit hard to tell you exactly how many people are using Tor right now. But I'm guessing probably 200,000, 300,000 people are running Tor right now. So it's quite a few people. And China, the US, and Germany are the top 3 countries that use it. So there are maybe 50,000 Tor clients running right now in China. As of a couple of years ago, the Tor project is a real live 501c3 nonprofit. We've got 8 full-time developers, which is pretty cool. There are a lot of different pieces. I'm mostly going to skip over the technology for this talk. I figure my goal is to give you a smattering of a bunch of different ideas, and then you can think about where to go from here. One of the neat things about Tor is the variety of funders we've had over the years. We started out funded by the US Department of Defense, the Naval Research Lab. And they care about Tor because they want to be able to send their soldiers or military people to various places around the world and have them be able to communicate securely. You don't want somebody watching the house in Iraq to be able to learn who's talking to who. And from there, we were funded by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF, because they care about civil liberties. And from there, we've been funded by the IBB, Voice of America people that Ethan was talking about earlier. So there are a variety of people out there who care about this sort of thing. When I'm talking to researchers, I tell them I'm working on an anonymity system. But when I'm talking to my parents and my grandparents, I don't call it anonymity. I say I'm working on privacy tools. And when I'm talking to Google and Walmart and other corporations, I work on communication security or network security. Because privacy, that's kind of stupid, and anonymity, that's kind of scary, but communication security, good point, I do need that. And when I'm talking to militaries and government and law enforcement, I work on traffic analysis resistant communication networks. Again, it's all the same stuff. It's all the same security properties. It's all the same networks. It's just figuring out how to phrase it so that they'll realize that it's a security property that they care about. Because the government, they already have security. But you're right, I do want to resist traffic analysis. I want to talk to other corporations, other websites, other governments without people learning who I'm talking to. And then the fourth category, one that we discovered a few years ago when a lot of people in China started mailing me saying, hey, I use this thing, and I don't mind the privacy aspects, but I mainly use it because now I can read BBC. Now I can read Voice of America. Now I can publish to my blog. And first of all, I can get to my blog so I can publish. But second of all, nobody knows that I'm the one blogging. So now I can finally actually communicate with the world, reading and writing. So that's how this fits on a civil society panel. One of the key components of being able to have a civil society is being able to participate without fear of repercussion, without being blocked, being able to whistleblow, being able to talk, being able to discuss freely. And part of the fun of all these different categories is figuring out how to explain it to each of these groups and bringing them into the same network. Because you can't have the Department of Defense anonymity system. Everybody would know that if you're using it, you're a DoD person. So you need to have the right-wing military crazy people and the left-wing libertarian wackos and the folks in China and Iran, and I'm going to do that too, and Iran and Vietnam and all these different groups in the same network in order to provide anonymity, in order to provide privacy, security. So there are a lot of circumvention tools out there. There are a lot of tools that let you get to a website even if your local firewall doesn't let you do it. There aren't so many circumvention tools that also care about the privacy, the security, the anonymity angle. So I'm going to focus more on that for this talk, because without that security, I think that you're really missing a key component to being able to communicate safely. And there are a lot of other things that we could be talking about when we're talking about circumvention. In the last panel, Rebecca was talking about filtering of websites if you take down the blog posts. So I'm mostly thinking of how can I let you get to a website, and from there I hope that the website actually will accept the material or give you the material you want. And there are separate research problems on how do you provide robust hosting even in the face of people who want to censor, but that's a separate talk. So a brief background on how you build these sorts of things, how you think about them, what we're trying to protect. So we've got Alice over here. She's trying to browse the web. And we've got Bob over here. He's a website or some other internet service. And Alice wants to get to Bob without the bad guy figuring out that she's the one doing it. So there are a lot of different places in this situation where somebody might be able to attack to try to figure out who's talking to who. We might be watching Alice's local network. Maybe I'm Alice's ISP, the government, I'm the Tunisian telephone company, something like that. Maybe I'm Bob, maybe I'm the website. I'm CNN and I'm really interested in advertising better. So I really want to know who all of my users are. Or maybe I'm someplace in between. Maybe I'm an ISP like AT&T that gets to watch quite a bit of the internet. So these are the various places where attackers might be who are trying to break these anonymity systems. Anonymity is not crypto. I talk to a lot of corporations who say, I use a VPN, so I'm totally safe. I don't need Tor. I've got encryption. And encryption is good. You should use encryption. But even if you're encrypting, you're still revealing who you're talking to, when you're talking to them, how much you're saying. And that traffic analysis is what all the intelligence agencies and other groups use to decide who to look at. Nobody tries to break crypto anymore. They all look at social networks and say, wow, you're the hub, you're the interesting one. I'm going to go break into your house or whatever it takes to learn more about you. And there are other versions of anonymity out there. A lot of them are policy-based. There's a company called anonymizer.com, and it's one proxy somewhere, and everybody moves all their traffic through it, and they get to watch everything. And they say, we promise we won't look at any of the traffic. We could, but we promise we won't. Okay, we look at it all. We promise we won't remember anything that we see. Okay, we write it all down. We promise we won't tell anybody anything that we see. What's the fourth line there? I want something stronger than that. I want something that's not trust-based, that's not policy-based, that's not, I promise I won't screw up even though I could. I want a system that actually enforces that actually prevents the operator from learning that sort of thing. So the simple approach, how you build these, is that one hot proxy. All of the Alices go to one big computer, and that big computer goes and fetches. And you've got some level of privacy here, because the websites over there don't know who asked for it, unless the big bad point of failure turns out to be bad. And there are all sorts of ways to figure out. You can go listen in on one wire. You can send a subpoena. You can send a guy named Guido on an airplane. You can offer $5,000 to the CEO. I want something stronger than that. So the goal for Tor is to distribute the trust over multiple hops so that no single relay here learns both Alice and Bob. And that means that if R1 is bad, if he's trying to figure out what's going on, he knows Alice is using Tor. He just doesn't know what she's doing. And if Bob is bad, if R3 is bad, he knows somebody's talking to Bob, but he doesn't know who. And if they're both bad, if somebody is watching connections into the Tor network and connections out of the Tor network, then we're screwed. That's too tough for us to deal with. But at least we're raising the bar. We're making it so that you have to be watching in several different locations in order to be able to figure out who's talking to who. And I'm skipping over the circumvention and censorship resistance and blocking resistance because I've only got 15 minutes. I'd be happy to chat about it more later on. And there's crypto. I'm not really going to talk about that, but the goal is somebody watching your local network connection. First of all, they can't figure out what you're connecting to, but also they can't read the traffic. We've got encryption. all throughout the Tor network. And there are many caveats to that, which I can talk about later. So there are a couple of interesting points for Tor. There are a couple of security properties that we try to provide. One of them is somebody watching your local network can't figure out who you're talking to. So that's really useful in places like China, because if they can't figure out what website you're going to, they can't say, no, you can't reach that one, I won't allow it. So at this point, we've boiled it all down to, can you get to Tor? Can you use Tor? If yes, you can reach the whole rest of the internet. And then the second property, no single relay in the middle learns both who you are and where you're going. And that means that they can't just volunteer to sign up a relay and learn everything. It's harder than that. And then the third point, which we haven't really gotten to much yet in the research world, but I think we will in the future, the destination can't figure out where you're coming from. Imagine if China goes to Google and says, you can work in China, it'll be fine, but I want you, anytime anybody shows up from a Chinese IP address, I want you to censor. If they're using Tor, Google can't figure out what country they're coming from. It can't treat you differently. So I've got a couple of minutes, so I'm going to skip past some various assumptions. One of the assumptions that we want to point out, in a lot of these contexts, I talk to security people, and they say, but China's just going to round up all the bloggers and kill them all. And in fact, actually, China has a much more complex approach than that. And they don't. So one of the interesting points, if you're just reading on the internet, even if you're reading really sensitive stuff, the worst that China does, they say, oops, and then they block it. They don't come bust down your door if you read the wrong thing. If you're posting and organizing and saying, let's meet at the street corner and we're going to take down the government, then they start to pay attention. So one of the challenges here is, how do we put both of those categories of users? How do we put hundreds of thousands of people who are curious to read about what this democracy thing is in with the hundreds of people who really want to write new articles and make them both safer from that? And it's not, there are a bunch of things that it doesn't solve. I was doing a training with Ethan a few years ago to a country that wasn't China, and we were all prepared to teach them about encryption and here are some tools you want to use. And they were telling us some horrible stories. They got a phone call during the talk saying, so-and-so just got arrested, what should we do? And they were saying, there's a guy with a parabolic microphone across the street listening to everything I say. So yeah, I use Skype and I use encryption, but they still know what I'm saying. When I go to the bathroom, they break into my house and they answer my Skype calls. So now I have to come up with some protocol where, of course I use encrypted Skype, but now I have to ask a question, and sometimes the guy on the other end doesn't know the answer. So I don't know who I'm talking to. So there are a lot of situations that Tor isn't going to be able to solve by itself. So we talked earlier about sustainability. One of the neat things about Tor is that the network is based on volunteers, which means even if I get hit by a bus this afternoon, the Tor network is still going to be around and still going to be sustainable. And of course, we'd love to have some more funding to make Tor faster and better and more usable and so on. But the actual software and the design, the specifications, everything that we've thought about, we do in the open, we do transparently. So that means that anybody else can reproduce, can test, can participate. Our goal is to increase the knowledge of everybody about how to build a safe, secure, anonymity, privacy, circumvention, security system. So a couple of other theories that I want to pose to you. I talk to a lot of security people who say, as the firewall in China starts cracking down more and more, tools like Tor are going to become scarcer and scarcer. Nobody's going to be willing to run them. I actually think it's going to be the opposite. I think as the firewall starts cracking down more and more, we're going to have more and more Tor users, and the average Tor user is not going to be a dissident saying, I hate my country, I want to change things. The average Tor user is going to be a guy who says, I could read my webcomics yesterday, and now they're blocked. So I'm going to get this circumvention tool, and now I'm going to be able to do it. So my expectation is that as governments crack down more and more, you're going to have more and more ordinary people using circumvention or privacy or security tools to be able to do what they used to be able to do. And then another concept to think about, publicity attracts attention. So The way that the firewall works, as I understand it, again simplifying, the direction that each ISP gets is don't embarrass us. And each ISP has some poor guy who says, don't embarrass us. What am I supposed to do with that? What, does that mean I should block stock quotes? Should I block porn? Should I block democracy? And that's why the diversity is so much from ISP to ISP. That's why different things are blocked in different places. So my theory is as long as we don't force them to block us, then their goal is not to block every possible bad website on the internet. Their goal is to give the impression of control. So the more New York Times articles you publish, the more likely it is that somebody's going to block your thing. Whether it works or not doesn't matter. The more obvious you are about it, the more rubbing their nose in it you are, the more they're going to have to deal. So the other point of that, we can control the pace of the arms race. The more I talk about Tor as a civil liberties tool, the more I talk about it as it's useful for all around the world. Our goal is not to do anything about China. Our goal is to give people tools and let them work from there. Then hopefully it'll be a more controllable pace. I was talking to a journalist a few years ago who wanted to write an article about Tor and China. And one of her questions was, so how are you doing against China? And I had to say, wait a minute, I'm writing software. My software is used by people in China. There are people in China who are doing against China. You should talk to them. But we're not doing against China. We're writing software, and I'm sympathetic to a lot of people around the world who want to change the world they live in. But that's a very separate point. So in the last 10 seconds or so, one of the other challenges here, technical solutions aren't going to solve the whole thing. In China, for example, there are still a lot of people who say, I'm so glad my government keeps me safe on the internet. I'm happy that they censor things because there's a lot of bad stuff on the internet. And as long as most of society thinks that way, this is not a technical problem. If I build a better tool, I'm not going to solve that problem. So we need a lot of folks like Isaac here to continue changing the culture they live in so that more people might be interested in publishing or reading in a more broad way. And then there are a bunch of other technical things we need to do. Right now, we accidentally succeeded. We've got hundreds of thousands of people using Tor, and the Tor network can't handle the number of users that it's got. So we've got a lot of technical challenges in terms of how do we scale it up to handle 1 million people rather than 200,000 people trying to use it at the same time. And then a last point, I'd love to teach people more about Tor and how to be safe on the internet. So if you know any groups who need to learn more about how these technologies work and how to be safe and stuff like that, please let me know. Thank you.